I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Welcome. Happy Wednesday, everyone. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. This is Sabs podcast. And I have special guests with me tonight. We have Garland Nixon, who was here about a week and a half ago. We're talking about defund the police. And of course, my comrade that you guys know from RBN, Nick, also known as Socialist MMA. What's going on, guys?
All wonderful.
Always good to do your show, Sabby. Always fun.
All right, cool. So, defund the police. This is part 2. And this time we're going to have this discussion with Garland and Nick. I'm more so going to be more like a moderator. I'm going to ask the questions and I'm going to let them have the discussion. So, the first question that I have, defund the police. We're going back to the phrase again for both of you. What are some of the issues that you may have with the phrase, or do you have an issue with the phrase? I'm going to go ahead and start with Garland.
Yes. Yeah. A couple of things. One of the things that I noticed and, kind of glaringly obvious is that, the over 50, the people in my age range don't like it at all. It doesn't ring at all. It seems to be rejected by the older generation. And so I try to be as self-aware as I can. And I find that intuitively, I don't like it. And so I ask myself, why? What is it that you don't like about it? Why does it not feel good? I'm a big feel person, right? And I guess when because I take it literally, and because, as I've said before, it has an anarchist sound to it. My roots are kind of like, my mentor was Paul Robeson Jr., my political mentor for years. And so my kind of roots are in the, I guess, closer to kind of the Malcolm X, kind of the, not exactly Black nationalists, a lot of Black socialists, things of that nature. And so that's a different rhetoric. To me, that's kind of the rhetoric, to be frank, of the anarchist that say no government, no police, no nothing. We just all, it's kind of like the, a libertarian kind of thing. Now, now here's the thing about it. I know that the policies behind that phrase are not anarchist policies, are not like, let's just get rid of all government and just run in all different directions like a bunch of lemmings. I understand. And when I listen to the policies behind it, I say, hey, that sounds like something I can get behind. Sounds like good policies. So what I find is, it's the phrase that I find disconcerting, and it's an intuitive feeling. And I guess maybe it's because my age, maybe people my age bracket or whatever. It's an intuitive feeling that says, ooh, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't feel good. And then when I hear what's behind it, I'm like, well, that does feel good. So that's what it is with me. The phrase doesn't feel right. It feels like anarchist because I take it so literally, like cut all money from the police, which then implies we don't have any police at all, which for, I guess, older people, they gives them the creeps. I don't know. But that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, and that definitely makes sense, because when people first hear the term, there's a lot of questions that are asked, right? I lean more towards it's a good slogan. I'm not too torn on like labels. I'm more obsessed with education, right? And I think that's the most important part of actually shifting this country to the left. Now, the reason why I lean more towards the idea that it's a good slogan was because if you look at what is actually considered slogans now, like think about it now, like Build Back Better, Make America Great Again, Hope and Change. These are slogans that actually means nothing. Now, when you have anti-establishment forces like we have, like you have working class proletariat that need to spread education, I don't think we need slogans that invoke false feelings. I think we need to get right to the heart of the matter, and that is the demand. Defund the police. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that make a lot of people uncomfortable. because it's not a slogan. It is a demand. Like we asking you guys, we telling you guys that your giant police budgets is something that we have never seen in the history of humankind, right? So yes, I understand that when people first hear the slogan, it's about confusion, but that is the thought-provoking emotion that we want people to start asking questions like, wait, what? Defund the police? Why would you need to defund the police? Now we start having the fiscal conversation. Now we start on the route of education as well. So another key reason why it's important to have a slogan that is actually a demand. You can't have, it won't be watered down and hijacked by the liberal class. And this is what they always do. This is why the Democratic Party is they are so effective at hijacking movements, right? Even slogans I consider to be good, demand-based slogans. Think about it. Cancel student loan debt. I think it's a good slogan because it's a demand. Cancel student loan debt. But even that demand was hijacked by the liberal class. We want to cancel student loan debt up to $50,000. Cancel student loan debt up to $10,000. You guys see what their role in killing movements is? So if you have any other demand that is watered down, that is not directly to the point, defund the police, they could easily hijack your movement like they have done. I'll give you guys another example. Black Lives Matter. How many liberals that you see support the giant police state? How many liberals you see support giant Wall Street have Black Lives Matter, hashtag Black Lives Matter in their profile? Because that's an easy slogan to say. I support Black Lives Matter, even though you had radical Black Lives Matter activists who started out the movement who was abolitionists, but they disagree with abolitionists, but they can say Black Lives Matter. You see how easy it is for them to hijack that term, right? So let's say they did try to hijack defund the police, right? How would that go for them? Let's say they go the student loan debt route, right? Let's defund the police up to a certain amount. Okay, that's a good start. That's why they can't do that. That's why they have to obsess and demand that we change the slogan. Because defund the police is a great slogan because you can't even hijack it. Even if you say you want to defund the police, okay, you say you want to decrease police budgets. That's a great start. They can't even say that. That's why they oppose the concept of defund the police. But they will praise Build Back Better all day. They'll praise Black Lives Matter all day. They'll even praise Eat the Rich. It's easy to hijack Eat the Rich. When you're a neocon and you defend giant police budgets, you don't want even the conversation about the fiscal conversation about this to be brought up, which I think is important. But I'll pass it back to the panel.
A lot of good points, and here's what I think. So what I hear and what I think about when I hear what you said is this: what is the relevance of the phrase to what you want to accomplish? So when people make America great again, build back better, eat the rich, things like that, those are empty phrases. It's just empty rhetoric. It means whatever you want. Eat the rich. We all know it doesn't mean you want to eat people. So what does it really mean, right? So when you have a phrase that amorphous, it just means whatever. It means whatever you want it to mean, and that can change. Even Black Lives Matter. I mean, the bottom line is, what does that mean? It doesn't have a point to it, right? One of my favorite phrases, and actually I was involved in this when they were doing the 2009, when I still thought there was some, hope for the Democratic Party back when I was still blind. I was working with John Conyers' office and Sheila Jackson Lee's office on Capitol Hill on the Obamacare. That's something I'm not proud of today, but no, it's good because I learned a lot of stuff. Okay. And there was back then they were using the term single payer. And me and a lot of my friends were like, that's techie. That's inside the beltway. It just sounds, it's wonky. People are never going to buy that. Single payer, what does that mean? Now we're still talking about paying. Bad idea, right? And I don't remember who came up with it, but we started, I think it was a guy named Joel Siegel, in fact. But at any rate, we started talking about Medicare for all. Why? Medicare, what are we talking about? Who gets it? Everybody. And what we came up with is you don't have to have anything behind it. It doesn't raise any questions. You don't have to say, well, what does that mean? You know when you hear it, Medicare for all. Hey, I want medical coverage and I'm part of all. Boom, that's who gets it, right? And so those hollow neoliberal phrases, the Obama, hope and change. And I was one of the suckers that fell for that. And in hindsight, I should have saw it coming because it don't mean nothing. But at the time, I was caught up in the, oh boy, he sounded so progressive. He was really good at that bullcrap. So at any rate, Now, I guess also because so many people have been had so many times with hollow neoliberal slogans, when people hear a slogan, they're suspicious. What are you saying? What are you really saying there, buddy? When I do, I am. We all been had so many times in America. So what happens with me, I think, my inclination and being an OCD kind of person that I am, when I hear something, when I hear defund the police, I take it literally. And I find a lot of people in my generation do literally remove all funding from the police, and there are no police whatsoever. That's the picture that's created in my mind, in the same way that Medicare for all creates the picture of, I know what Medicare is. Now everybody's going to get it. So I take that literal. And I think what happens with slogans of any kind, phrases, people take them literally. And if it's something like that, rather than with me, when I hear defund the police, rather than think, hey, I wonder what they're saying there, I think, ooh, that sounds like anarchy. I ain't down with that. And I don't really get to the point where I'm curious. It's more I'm not going to use the word. No, let me be honest. It's kind of revolting to me. It's kind of anarchic. It comes across like the white anarchists that are running around in the street saying, get rid of the government, get rid of everybody. We're all just going to fend for themselves, like some kind of, libertarian stuff to me. That's the way it sounds. But when I delved into it and saw what you were saying, I'm like, man, that's what I'm down with these brothers and sisters and everybody. That's cool. So is it okay? I mean, is it a good idea to have a slogan that you have people of a particular generation or people, that are almost revolted by the slogan, it's like this. The slogan, it's almost like if I looked at a plate of food and it looked gross, and then I ate it, and it was like when I first thought about sushi, I was like, ugh, raw fish, that seems kind of gross. Then I ate it, I'm like, oh, it's delicious. But I had to taste sushi to find out. And I went years and years, I don't even remember why. Probably a pretty girl or something with me. I tried sushi. And boom, there you go. So, that's the only thing I think. And if I'm trying to accomplish something, right? If I'm trying to start a movement, if I'm trying to build coalitions, I want to put candy out in front. I want to put shiny gold out front. I want to hold something up that everybody's going to say, hey, look at that pretty thing over there. I'm attracted to that and come towards it. And if I find that there's a group of people who actually are like, yikes, that gives me the creeps, I'm running. Is that the best slogan? It's like you got the best restaurant, the best food in the world, but your restaurant doesn't look great. Some people are going to, and some people are going to be interested. And there's a certain amount of people that are going to look at the restaurant and say, what's that, a pink and green restaurant with octopus arms hanging out the windows? No, thanks. I don't want that. Even though the food's great, they would never know it. So is it the best idea? If you're selling a product, if you're doing public relations, to have something that you have to have that struggle with. I'm just saying, if your main focus is the policies, and your policies are right, your policies are good, your policies are attractive, is it in your best interest if the doorway to get into that policy is stuck for some people? If the doorway is something that some people don't want to go through? I'm just saying, I don't know if the answer is yes or not. I'm not saying I'm right. I may be completely wrong, but I'm just throwing out an alternative perspective there.
Okay, Nick, I want to give you a chance to answer that, but I also want to throw in this question as well, because I've heard anarchy twice now. Mm-hmm. So the next question I have is anarchy necessarily a bad thing? Is it necessarily a bad thing to have some anarchy? So Nick, I want to give you a chance to respond to Garland, and you can answer that question as well.
So yeah, we can't shy away from the education opportunity. I think that's the best word, because this is an amazing opportunity that we haven't seen before. And there's a lot of fear mongering over anarchy. But if you guys watch International Leftist Coalition, my host, Josana, she's an anarchist. And I talk to a lot of anarchists. And if you asked me maybe 2-3 years ago, like what I feel about anarchy, I'm like, what? Are you crazy? But actually, when I talk to these people, they are more community-based. That's why they don't believe in system of hierarchies, right? So because they believe that the leaders of your community, like the people who get together, actually are smart enough to decide what's best for them. And the idea that actually the opposition of that is inherently imperialistic and based on colonialism, because it's the idea that you're going to set policy that you is better for the community, because those savages, they don't know what's good for them, right? That's the idea. right? So this is this is an inherent concept when we talk about abolition and defunding the police, because when we actually looking at what it actually look like, it actually giving power to the community, give us the resources, allow us to decide what is the best option for our community. And when you look at 10 demands, that's actually a giant part of what we are asking for. Like, give us the resources, let us set up the committees. We can set up public safeties committees on our own. What is the argument to the alternative? That we can't, that we somehow inferior, that we can't take care of our communities? Even though if you look at historically, indigenous people, Africans, Latinos, that's always been our way of governing ourselves, right? It's through public committees that focus on public safety. Now, this is another reason why I actually think it is a good slogan. Which, once again, to be clear, I'm not one of these people that in love with like terms. So it's like, if we can think about another way, something else to call it, I'm not opposed to that. I just think the current name is good, because you get that reaction of people like, oh man, what are we getting rid of all the money? Like, I actually want this fiscal debate, because if you look at our path that we lay out in 10 demands, a giant part is education. Propaganda has waged a war on the American working class to the point where people believe that cops actually protect people. They actually think cops serve the community. That is not what they do. They serve capital. Right now, they are forcibly evicting homeless people off homeless camps at gunpoint. Like, is that community? That's serving the community. When you impose regressive taxes and fees on your brothers and sisters over small violations, right? That is not protecting and serving community. That's you waging class war. Now, and I'm not getting a little slightly off here, but if you think about this, if you have laws and you have punishment that is based on finances, let's say you got a speeding ticket. If you are of the wealthy bourgeoisie class, let's say a $200 speeding ticket, that is a significantly higher percentage of my income than it is of a CEO, for example, right? So if you're a CEO and you don't feel the effects of that $200 ticket, that is not a punishment. That means you essentially made a finance-based crime. Like, it's only a crime that affects the working class. So this is what we want to get rid of. And this is the argument we want to tell people. Like, these systems are not designed to protect you. Cops solve less than 2% of all crimes. And if you look at the police budgets, the battle against the national security state that we have right now, the battle against the police state, the new Jim Crow, is one of the biggest struggles that the Black community is going up against right now, because civil asset forfeiture steals a massive amount of our wealth. The generational wealth that destroyed through the carceral system is unbelievable. So when we talk about the budgets themselves, we want to have the conversation and bring up the fact, for example, the NYPD has a budget that is 3 times more than the North Korean military budget. And a lot of that is instituted to stop the frisk and the drug war. And I want to get back to Garland point. I know I'm talking about a lot of theory here, but I'll get back to I want to get back to Garland's point. You can be very smart when you sell this. There is a myth, and I watched a video recently that was on Bad Faith when Breonna Joy Gray was talking to some guy, and he was talking about radicals and he was talking about defund the police movement as well. And there's like this myth, and I'm not saying that people who say it are classists, but they fall for it almost on accident because of classism, where they think that activists are somehow chickens with their head cut off, that we don't have a plan, that we don't know how to talk to people. I talk to a ton of older Black people. If you bring up things like ending qualified immunity, ending the drug war, these are things that, as you mentioned, Garland, are massively popular, even among older Black people, right? That is part of the road to abolition and the road to defund and the education that we need them to have. So if you support ending the drug war, if you support ending the regressive taxes and fees on the working class, like many of these people do, like banning the street economy, like making sex work illegal, making the street drug trade honestly illegal. A lot of people don't support this kind of stuff, but that's a giant part of police budgets, right? So you just talk to people like, if you don't support that, and in the 80s we almost doubled police budgets because of the new Jim Crow, where does the money go? Like, this is the process. And then once you sell it that way, you get people thinking like, yeah, I do support ending the drug war. Yeah, I do support releasing non-violent drug defenders. You gotta understand, these reforms that we asked for in 10 demands, these naturally defund the police. This is a natural, when we talk about disarming the police, that's defunding the police. So I'm asking people to actually, once again, when you have like the boutique left, I'm sorry, I'll pass it to you, Garland. I know I went.
No. Go ahead.
When you had the boutique left pretend that we don't know what we're doing, and that's what and Bree did a great job pushing back at her guest. I don't remember his name. I apologize. But his argument, and the argument I hear from the boutique left all the time, is that somehow abolitionists and people that advocate for defund the police don't know how to sell the idea. That we don't know that you got to go through the local government. That you don't know that there are reforms that we can do that and lead it that way. Like ending qualified immunity, set up accountability boards, literally oppose every single police budget increase year by year, and then propose police budget decreases. Like we got a plan, and the idea that we don't is something we hear all the time that I always got strongly put back on. So when we have this debate, we just explain the plan. And based on my history, we had a lot of success doing that. Like once we get people to like, all right, what's the plan? We explain the plan. Oh, I like the plan. Let's move forward. Let's start working together on local government. So I'm sorry I went for a while, but there was a lot to break down there. I won't pass it back to the panel.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say this. And I look, most of the stuff you say, I'm in agreement with you on policy wise. You know, you're preaching to the choir here. The only thing I say is this: rather than have to sell a phrase, I prefer, rather than have to sell a phrase for the movement, I prefer a phrase that sells the movement. That's why I said Medicare for all. I prefer a phrase that has the hook in it, like a song. When you hear that, you go, oh man, what song is that? I like that song. And you just heard 3 chords, right? And it rather than, oh, I don't know about that song. It's really good. Listen to the rest. Well, yeah, the people that listen to the song are going to get that, but then you got to rope them in there to listen to the song. So that's my thing about it. I don't think, I'm going to put it like this. Let me example. I know a guy, a friend of mine had a book. Couldn't sell worth of crap for a year. The publisher called them and said, hey, we're going to try a different name. He changed the name. The doggone thing was on the New York bestsellers list. Why is that? Because of the name. Because people looked at the name of the book and no. Oh, wait, let me get that one. So I think language is important. The name is important. And I think if you're fishing, you got to have the right bait. And if you don't have the right bait, yeah, you're going to catch a fish every now and then. You're going to snag some, but you're going to get more with the best bait. So that's all I'm saying about it. All the rest of the stuff you and I are down with. And that is the money should be reallocated. And there's a lot of details haven't been on the inside. One of the big ones that people don't know, I used to work for the ACLU at one point, and during the Freddie Gray trial, I worked for the ACLU and I worked with the city and all that kind of stuff and the police department. And interestingly enough, I went in there and I was able to point out something that they didn't recognize because I've been in negotiations with police departments. And this is something people watching really should know. Here's an insider's trick, an insider's issue that anybody who's dealing with this particular issue specifically should know. One of the issues that was coming up was this. The police department would have all kinds of rules. For instance, they got a camera. And a policeman does something and you're going to bring the police officer in, he's accused of doing something, whatever, beating somebody up, whatever the case may be. And you're going to come in and you're going to bring him in and, question the officer, right? They had a rule that the officer got to view this tape, view the video before questioning. Well, guess what? I mean, which one of us is a dummy? None of us. If you let me or anybody else who's accused of mopery on the high seas, if you see me watch the video of me allegedly moping, whatever that is, on the high seas, I can come up with a story based on the video that I watched. So we were like, well, no, actually, there were people in the room who were like, how'd that happen? I said, I don't have to ask. Let me tell you what happens. What a police department does, they know how it works. Every, say, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, a police department will negotiate with the city or state or whatever for a new collective bargaining agreement, right? And here's what they'll say. We want to, let's say they want that. They want their officers to be able to view the video before they get questioned, so none of them will ever get caught doing anything wrong because they can come up with a nice soft story. They watch the video, they talk to their lawyer, and their lawyer says, tell them you did this, and you'll walk, right? And I said, this is simple. I know how to. They're like, how do they get these outrageous rules? How do the police departments get these outrageous rules that they can do anything? I said, piece of cake. Let me tell you how it's done. I've sat in the room. The police department's smart. The negotiator comes in and he says to the city council, okay, we're here to negotiate for our collective bargaining agreement. Now, he's got a list of these outrageous things that the city would be outraged if they knew were there. And he says to the mayor, city council, whoever, we want a 14% raise. And they go, my God, we don't have that in the budget. We can't give you a 14% raise. They go, okay, in that case, here's some things that won't cost you any money. We'll take these. And they're outrageous. And they get them. You know, it's a bargaining trick. They get them. You ask for a fortune. Oh, no, we can't give you a fortune. Well, in that case, I just happen to have a list of some things that we will take. And then we'll leave you alone for the 10%. We'll knock it down to 3%. Okay, 3%. Yeah, we'll give you all of that. What is it? You look at it and it's absurd things. And then at some point later, somebody gets beaten up or shot or whatever. And then the people find out, you mean the police get ready to get to view the video before they're questioned? How did that happen? And I said, that's how it happens. So what people in every city, in every municipality should always do is they should go to their city council. They should find out, when does the collective bargaining agreement end for the police department in this town, city, whatever. Oh, it is May 1st, 2023. Great. They go to city council. We want a regulation in our city that says we have to be notified in the paper when it's going to be, when it goes up, 3 months beforehand, 60 days. We want the opportunity for open discussion so that people from our groups can come into the room and watch, and the police department and the city negotiate. And before the city signs off, we want an option for it reviewed. And we want that. See, those are important. Those are like an insider's game. That if you don't know, guess what? You'll end up getting head, because you'll say, I want to cut the budget. And they'll say, sure, we'll cut the budget, but we would like a few little things here. And when you realize what they've written, that's not money. There's things that will shield them from accountability. So money is an option. It's a big issue, right? Certainly it's an issue. But the other issue, something that I've worked on a lot, and that is, how do you make sure that police departments aren't shielded from accountability? Because they get all these rules and regulations in their collective bargaining agreement that allows them, even if they did it, they're going to walk every time because the rules are so weighted in their favor. One other thing I want to say before we get back, and that is on the issue of anarchism. I oppose that for this reason. Having traveled in South America and Venezuela and gone out to little towns and talked to the people who are socialists and who at the most grassroots level have worked when the Americans were overthrowing their country. They had to deal with the empire destroying things, and they had to work from the ground level up to build a movement that what they wanted was socialism. That's what they wanted. I could talk about that, what they want and how forever, but they had to work because they had this gigantic, powerful military economic machine trying to crush them and stop them from what they wanted, right? And it was working together as a group. It was, when I talked to them, basically what they said was this: well, y'all named it socialism. Our tribe's been living like this for 10,000 years. Y'all came up with the name socialism. We just work together as people, as a group. And when you see in the little villages, there's like, when you go in these villages, there's people that have like these different uniforms on. What you see is there's so much volunteerism. They volunteer to help the old, or when they voted, they had people there that was volunteering to help seniors or the disabled or pregnant women to vote, bringing them through. It was just really amazing to watch a socialist community. And the binds, that they had, the emotional and the cultural ties that they had. It was a really beautiful thing to see how happy those people were. But my point is, to me, when you talk about anarchism, let me say this: it can't work for Black folks in America, because what Black people need is group protections. We don't need protections because we're an individual, because we're an American, which we ain't citizens. We need protection because we're a member of a group. And anarchy and libertarianism is so much about individuality and about the individual being able to do this or that. I go in the other direction and say, for us, that's why you don't see a lot of Black libertarians, because it's about,
Can I chime in, Garland?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry about that. We both get started and we get so excited we don't know.
I just want to chime in. With this, because once again, I had a lot of conversations with anarchists, and they will actually have the exact opposite approach. I would say there are people who call themselves capitalist anarchists. I see people who say they represent the ideology, who I think you hit the nail on top of the head. But when you look at people who lean more in the communist direction, the people who are anarchists that way, they actually stress the community more than anything, because their argument is that what we live right now is under a system of hierarchies where the capitalist class actually have way more power to determine what's best for their communities. So instead of individualism, we will argue that anarchists want we prefer communities. Like, it's actually that exact opposite individualism. And one last thing, I'll pass it right back to you. I interrupted. I don't agree with Chomsky on everything, but there is one thing that Chomsky said I thought was pretty brilliant that rung with me ever since I read it. When he said he defined anarchism, because he was a advocate of anarchism, he said he would define it as government that justifies itself. And I think that's a key phrase that we need to tell people, because that's why if you ask someone about anarchy, like they will assume that you're against government, right? But under the concept that you believe in hierarchies and structures that justify itself, Medicare for all, that's why a lot of anarchists support that, because Medicare for all is a system that inherently justifies itself, meaning people get health care, it actually boosts the economy, boosts wages. Now, what anarchists will argue is that giant police budgets is a system that do not justify itself. Because I explained earlier that, and once again, you say we agree mostly on this as well. It's just our primary disagreement on strategy, but I think we all agree that when we spend this amount of money on military, on the police, that will be the third-ranked military budget, and it and it doesn't prevent crime. The anarchist take on that would, okay, so this doesn't justify itself, right? So that's the only thing I would add to that. That would be my pushback, is that the anarchists, I know the people who define themselves as anarchists, they will actually consider themselves very community based instead of individual. In our system as it is right now with hierarchies, we have the capitalist class tell you how to live, and they demand individualism out of you. That more of a right-wing capitalist approach. So, but I'm open to hear what you guys think, because there's a lot of different interpretations of anarchism. That's kind of how I interpret it. And once again, I actually have a very, very hard time labeling myself. People who follow my content will know, like, there are tenets of anarchism I like. There are a lot of tenets of Marxist-Leninism I like, but that's why I don't think labeling myself is important. I think the ideas are. So these debates as a leftist is something I don't really want to I don't want to shy away from that. So if people are like, oh my God, ooh, boo, anarchism, I'm like, okay, what's your fear? Now, there is a good point that you make, Garland, and this is where the disagreement of strategy plays out. And you see a lot of people who are more sympathetic to the electoral politics strategy, like Democrats. They tend to, they hate that people are immediately turned off by the phrase, right? They would say the defund. Oh, that's a hard thing to explain if you're running a campaign. You know what I mean? The campaigns is all about quick sound bites. We got a 60-second ad. You can't explain defund. And if you have your opponent like, oh, you support defund the police, what are you gonna do? Run a 60-second ad like, oh, I don't really technically. I mean, I agree with you. That actually is hard to do, right? But when you have my approach, when I believe in more of a community-based, mutual aid-based approach, and when I mean mutual aid without education is charity. So what Rome does, and Rome's playing this all the time, when he does tour for the poor, when he's feeding people, when he's closing people, he's teaching people the concept of communism when he's doing that. Because if you have mutual aid and you're not doing that, you're just doing charity. Like, that's mutual aid about building the horizontal structure we need for a revolution, right? So this is the part of the movement building that I believe in. So we even talked about this Sabby before, where why not have a general strike where you run it like a campaign? Like, why not knock on doors for a general strike? Why not knock on door for mutual aid programs? Now, this puts you in a situation where you can do those explanations that doesn't work in electoral politics. So if you have someone to say, oh, it's hard to have these nuanced conversations about defund the police if we're trying to win this race, you may be telling the truth. But I'm saying that we can affect real local change by building community, by having these conversations. And as a leftist, as an anti-capitalist, I believe these are kind of things that we should embrace. And it worked. This is my point of why defund is a good slogan. It worked at the end of the day, because this has been shown, and I listen. Can I share? Because I'm not gonna get into it, but I just want to show the receipt, because we always.
Just one second, Nick. I want to grab some of these super chats really quick.
Yeah, go ahead. I gotta find it again.
Thanks so much, Craig, for the super chat. The folks you are trying to change the language for aren't going to be down, no matter what you call it, when it's not supported by mainstream media. Thanks so much, Craig. And Kyle, thanks for the super chat. Check out the Texas Free Thinkers 1850s. I'll have to look into that. And another one from Justin. Thanks so much. How would Garland suggest we reprimand law enforcement organizations that employ paramilitaries such as in Charlottesville and Kenosha? I'll go ahead and let you answer that, Garland and Nick, while you pull up your article.
I have it here. I
What
let
was the
Garland. I let Garland finish because I won't be too long. But Garland, go
Yeah.
ahead.
What was the first question? Sorry, ADD. I don't maintain it long. It's straight
Oh, no,
through
no
it.
worries. How would Garland, where did it go? That was Justin. Oh, the first one wasn't a question, it was more a statement.
Okay.
The folks are trying to change.
Oh, yeah, I want to comment on that. And let me just say this. I understand the fatalist approach that, no, they're never going to listen. It's never going to work. But I never believe in that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's something I don't believe in doing. I'm an optimistic person by nature. And I feel like you have to believe in what you do. You have to, let me put it to you like that. This is something I believe in. This is the way I believe in activism, right? And this is I made this story up. I don't know if it makes sense, but I'll tell you. There's a guy, and somebody walks down to the dock, and there's an aircraft carrier, the guy there, and the guy sees a guy, and he's standing there pushing against the aircraft carrier. He says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm pushing this aircraft carrier." He says, "That's ridiculous. What a waste of time. You will never move that aircraft carrier." And he says, "I know that." He says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "It's a hobby. I'm an aircraft carrier pusher. It's just what I do." He does it because he does it. He doesn't know whether or not he's going to get results, but he's never going to stop doing it because that's what he likes to do. And I think that's the way you have to be with activism, because if you get ahead of yourself, W.E.B. Du Bois in 1910 was fighting for the rights of Black folks. He would be long dead, and we're still fighting for our rights. We've come a long way since him. But why did he do that? He did it because that's who he is. So I understand in America, what we've been up against and how long we've been struggling and how little we've gotten. Well, consider where we were. We've gone a long ways, but we haven't really moved anywhere to me, because the goal is equality. And if you don't have equality, you're still not a citizen of the United States. But my perspective is, I would never say it won't work or they won't listen or this group won't listen. I would say, keep doing what you're doing. Do what you believe in. Do it hard. If you can see the ship moving, fine. If the ship don't ever move, the day you died, you pushed as hard as you could for as long as you could, and somebody else will come along and push if that's what they like to do.
Okay. And then the other one, sorry, real quick.
No,
Nick.
sorry, go ahead.
The other question was, how would Garland suggest we reprimand law enforcement organizations that employ paramilitaries such as in Charlottesville and Kenosha?
See, I don't think it's a matter of reprimanding. I think it's a matter of changing the system that we're in. And now I can turn fatalistic, because I always say you can't talk about police without talking about the military and the military industrial complex, because it's the same thing. In the same way that we say, we just spent $778 billion for the military, but we can't do Medicare for all for people, what we're talking about is the same thing. Well, wait a minute. We can buy cops, all of these drones and all this stuff in a city where Black folks is struggling and suffering and can't pay their bills, and people are getting thrown out, and we got these gigantic budgets for police. Something is wrong there. Where are our priorities? And it's the same thing. And then what happens? And I've seen this. The empire sends these people around the world to shoot brown people in whatever country, AFRICOM or wherever. Their minds are damaged, destroyed. They come back. They're sociopathic monsters now. Really, unfortunately, they're victims of the empire. Then they hire them as a police department, and they dress them just like they were dressed when they were on the streets of Kabul. And they feel just like they felt when they were on the streets of Kabul. And what do we get? We get the empire's soldiers that were out there doing that thing, and now the empire has brought them back, and they're the same thing here. And you know what? I don't think it's an accident. I think that's what the empire wants, that the empire wants to turn that war against terror, that war of terror, inside, so they can maintain this. What are they doing it to? Mostly there, brown folks around the world. Mostly here, what are they doing to it? Brown folks. It's keeping the brown folks of the world at bay, at second-class citizenship. And I think we're having the same discussion when we talk foreign policy and domestic policy. One thing I did want to say, though, and I won't be too long on this, when we were talking about Marxism or how we view things, Marxism, Leninism, anarchy. Having traveled in South America and talking to the people, a lot of people don't realize, what do they want? They're socialists or Marxists or Leninists, Maoists, what, blah, blah, blah. I can tell you it's pretty simple if you look at it. And this is what the U.S. hates. What they tend to do in South America is this. You look at Bolivia, on and on. What is that? They've got lithium or gas or whatever, right? They actually see, because when you talk about anarchy, you're talking about a weak government. That ain't what they want. They want a strong central government, number one. They want a government of the people. Maduro was a bus driver. The guy Castillo was a former farmer. Instead of people who were born to the top 1% in the elite ruling class, they want to elect somebody who was a bus driver or a teacher or a farmer. That's the person that they'll elect, right? And what they'll do is, in Bolivia, they've got gas, they've got whatever, right? They want a government to say, we've got some natural resources. We don't want Exxon Mobil or any of them to come in. We're going to sell our lithium on the market. Our government is going to have a couple of major government corporations, and they're going to use that for our natural resources to make money. We're going to then take the money that the government, a strong central government that has, and we're going to use that money to fund social programs. And I saw that myself. And, they're giving away homes. Electricity is considered a right, a human right. They're giving away food. And how do they do that? By selling their natural resources. So instead of here, Shell, Exxon Mobil, et cetera, make the money, their strong central government has a company that makes the money, funds it, and helps the poor. The other thing was, I remember going to like tolling, to the polling places when they're electing. And I saw a bunch of policemen, soldiers, literally, they're Jeeps, they got guns and all that. And I'm like, aren't y'all scared? Oh my gosh, these soldiers, if I was here and I came to the poll, people wouldn't vote. And they said, no, they're here to protect us. Because in the past, they had these right-wing jerks who were, of course, sponsored by the United States that would attack the people at the polling places. And so in the countries that are the one, particularly one I talk a lot about is Venezuela, the soldiers, the people see the soldiers as there to protect them. So they see a strong central government as one that will protect them from the oppression of the United States, protect them from these right-wing goon squads that's going to attack, that's going to protect them. It's hard to have that view in America, but when you go to a country and you see people who see a strong central government as something that protects you, because the people in the government are not of the top 1% and the elite ruling class. They're bus drivers and farmers and teachers and stuff like that. They have your best interest in mind. So there's a paradigm that we suffer from living in America, not even having an idea that there could be a strong central government that could act in your be on your behalf, because the strong central government that we have is one that's abusive and oppressive, particularly of people of color around the world.
This is a good discussion going on.
Yeah, the only thing I add to that real quickly is pretty much that struggle that you outlined there, the disagreement, because there are socialists in Latin America who do believe we should have a strong central government. These are more the Marxist-Leninist thinking, and then you had the anarchists. And I see these people, they clash all the time because they think about what do we do post-revolution? Do we have the centralized government, or do we have a system without hierarchy? So that's like the big divide among communist activists. And once again, I always have a hard time figuring out where I lay on that spectrum, because I hear from anarchists like Josana, I hear from Marxist-Leninists, like a lot of my friends like Jackson Hinkle, for example, who make strong arguments. I'm like, my position is I'd rather take care of the problems that we're dealing with right now. Like let's fight and destroy U.S. imperialism. Let's fight for Black liberation. And once we get to that point where we gotta have the discussion and the debate about whether we're going to go the Marxist-Leninist way of thinking, the centralized government, or the anarchism, turn down hierarchies, we can debate and discuss that then. But right now we got so many things that's going on. I think it's best to form coalitions to fight the struggle in right now. But that's pretty much the struggle that you outlined, is the debate between MLs and anarchists. But back to you, Sabby.
Oh, can I make one other quick comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm with what you said earlier, because I'm like this. People are like, what are you? Are you a capitalist or you're socialist? Here's what I say. I don't need a label. I don't need a label. I'm for a government that works in the best interest of the people. I'm going for a government that provides the needs for the most needy of us. I'm in for a government that is is made up of people who are from the working class, et cetera, not a bunch of 1% rulers. So I don't care what the label is. I just want one that works for the people and that treats people both inside your country and outside the country as human beings and with respect. So I can read, I read all kinds of different stuff and all that, but I don't really care what it's called. I'm kind of with you. I don't care what it's called. A label is not necessary for me, because a lot of times if you have a label, it's just something people will use to attack you. Oh, well, you're a so-and-so, you're not this. They might agree with you, but they attack you over the label, which is something we're talking about anyway. But yeah, I'm with you. I just want something that works for the people.
Awesome. I want to give a shout out to DJD14D. Thanks for the super chat. You're beautiful in all the ways, Nick. Love. Thanks so much, DJ.
You're too kind, my friend. Too kind.
Thanks so much. I am going to transition into the abolition part of this, because Eric brings up, I assume this is Eric. I could be wrong. E.G. Butler brings up a good point here. Doesn't our system of property and ownership require protection? And I want to open this up to both of you. When we talk about abolishing the police, are you for or against abolishing the police, and why?
Who's first?
I can go first. So I didn't reach the conclusion that I came to lightly, and I think there's still this giant divide where people are like stuck in 2014, 2015 when they talk about politics, right? I truly believe our biggest battle is against the growing national security state, and there's a lot of theories that has been written that we discussed, right, Garland? But I want to highlight that I respect a lot of these people too. Like I read a lot of Marx, I read a lot of Black Panther literature, I read a lot of this stuff. But you guys gotta understand that the struggles that we are going through right now, name a point in time where humanity had to go up against them. We are up against a completely new and unique challenge. The challenge of the climate crisis, the merging of powerful corporations that hold all the wealth and state, like the big tech companies merging with our government. We also have spanning government powers like mass surveillance, NSA, spying as well, the expansion of massive police budgets. Name a time in human history, and I know there have been a lot of movements that had to go against a lot of struggles, like the civil rights era movement going against the massive white supremacy system. You have different like French revolutions against monarchies, revolutions against the Roman Empire. There's been crazy times. There have been crazy times in human history. My argument is there have never been a moment like this. Like there's never been a national security apparatus as large as we, because not only do we have the national security apparatus as the United States, United States is teamed with the UK. Look at the UK just sided with the United States to extradite Julian Assange. This is a giant. This is NATO, right? It's a giant neoliberal alliance against the workers. When have we ever been against that in human history? So theory is great to learn from. So I reached all my conclusions looking at where we stand right now. And when I look at the war that has been waged by the police state against our people, indigenous people, because like if I like looked at reality and I was observing what's going on and I saw cops behave the way they are portrayed in Law and Order, SVU, and in Rush Hour, I'm like, yeah, cops are dope, because the way they portray there is they are swashbuckling heroes that saving people, solving crimes. That is not what they do. Like there have been stories of cops like showing up at people's homes because they're being evicted right now because there's a massive homelessness crisis right now. There are cops that on Indigenous People Day, that colonizers called Columbus Day, there was indigenous activists that were protesting Line 3, which is pretty much a corporate polluting of indigenous lands, like they did in Standing Rock. So was the police standing in solidarity with the indigenous people and helping serve their community by helping them resist the corporate state? No. I covered this on my show. They was busting their heads in and applying tear gas on indigenous activists on Indigenous Peoples Day, protesting corporations. That's their role. Like I said, I wanted the police system to work. And I know it's going to be a long, stressful transition to get people to be at where I'm at right now. But the civil rights movement was not solved in 10 years. Like, I remember I was led to believe the civil rights movement started in 1960. Then in 1964, we won. No, it started the end of slavery. We had the black codes. The civil rights era was a 100-year process. 100-year process. But did they abandon that fight because it was hard? Oh my God, white moderates are being scared away. They didn't run from it. You fight these things because you have to. Now, this is what I'm about to show, but I think it relates to what I have right here, because I'm actually shocked. And this is why I actually signed on defund the police is a good. Because once again, people are like, oh, I'm not for defund, but when I actually talk about it and when I actually learn about it, I'm for that. That's what I want a slogan to do. You guys understand that this number was like minus 35 last in actually it's not, yeah, during the George Floyd protest, right? Last summer. No, 2020 summer. So I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the summer of 2020 during the George Floyd protest, when they polled this, and I got the receipts, I can pull it up, but I'm gonna save time and not do that. But this number was like minus 35 with people who don't want to decrease the police. This is way faster than I had planned. And this is what we stress. Like, people agree with the concept. I didn't think that would happen this fast, to be honest. I was expecting a 10 to 20 year struggle. But I was down to have that 10 to 20 year struggle because this is something that has to happen because of what I just laid out. I'll pass it back to the panel because I know I went long. But I think the battle against the national security state and the battle against the police because of the way they siphon our wealth, the regressive taxes and fees, the fact that you have white America, they're making billions of dollars of a plant that our people are still being put to prison for. I got a cousin that is fighting legal battles, that is stealing his wealth away because he don't got job opportunities because the legal battle they fought because of marijuana. This is a battle we can't run from, no matter how hard it is. My argument is that, holy shit, we made a lot of progress in 2 years because all things considering that you have people that are saying, oh, this is not the right direction. You have people who pretend they are friends and say, oh, I support the spirit of this, but I think the activists, they're dum-dums who don't know what they're doing. Like, this kind of stuff hurt our movement. Instead of unapologetically taking the slogan and be like, all right, let's explain this stuff to you guys. Let's do some education, which will be required. These people was like, this is awful. This is going to hurt the Democrats. This is going to do this. That's not the job of activists, to make sure the Democrats are electable. It's our job to educate people. And we have done an amazing job, all things considering. So let's keep up the work. Don't allow people to fearmonger you over like the title, the slogan, the phrase, because all that does is kill momentum. That's all it does. Like, we on the right. People are shocked by the slogan, but then they research it. They hear about it, which led to why the charity before. Oh, shit. I would afford defund the police. I actually don't like Black Lives Matter, but I like the idea of reducing police budgets. And that's where a lot of Americans are. It make leftists upset, but the average American they're not violent with Black Lives Matter. They're not violent with Antifa, but they do want to reduce the police budgets. And honestly, I'm okay with that. You don't have to like me. Like, you don't have to approve of everything, our slogan, as long as you reach the promised land. But I'll pass back to the panel, right?
Well, here's another thing too. And I think, and this is important, we're going to agree that I'll be honest, I wouldn't have a police department. I would rename it to everywhere. It would be the Department of Public Safety.
Yeah, I strongly agree with you on that.
Would have a patch that said, public safety something or other. It wouldn't be officer, public safety assistance something, whatever name, but it would be public safety. It would never be police, because police by itself implies that you are going to tell people what to do and you're going to take act. You know what I mean? It implies a certain amount of militaristic. And I think even starting off with, changing it to the Department of Public Safety, changing the mission, things like that. And you would have some people you'd have unarmed people that would handle a lot of things. They do that, in other countries. And I agree, completely rethink what we're doing with this whole police thing and change it into Department of Public Safety and change it into what we do. Is what I think ought to be done. And somebody just called the Department of Mental Health. And for instance, In the state of Maryland, they got the Maryland Natural Resources Police. What do? Well, they have law enforcement authorities, but they do wildlife and stuff like that, right? Well, what's wrong with having an element that was under the Department of Health and Mental Services, an element that was under Department of Public, you know what I mean? And have different things that you put together for this conglomeration of this organization, but the organization should be acting in the best interest of the citizens, which now, to me, you know, when people are like, well, we've got to get the Democratic Party or whatever, you know, I don't belong. I'm independent. I don't even go to any of these parties. To me, I refer to them as two brainwashed cults. That's the way they are. Brainwashed cults who believe things that are absolutely absurd simply because they're members of that party. And I learned my lesson. I was a big Bernie person. That's when I learned 2016. I was a big Bernie supporter. And when I saw what happened with Bernie, I was like, well, this is not a party. And they're just giving us a ruse to pretend that there's democracy here. I see what this is. And out the door I went. But I think the other part of it is, a big part of it is, and it's what I've worked on, is there's got to be accountability, because it's not just about money. You know what I mean? If it was just about money, cut 20% of the budget and you'll have 20% less shootings of policemen, you know, or 20. No, there's a lot more to it. A big part of it is the culture that is created, but it's not created within a police department. It's created by the intent of having a police department. What is the police department there for? It is there to act on behalf of the elite ruling class. It is actually there to keep the lower people in the class system in their place. And Black folks, we would need a stepladder to get to the bottom of the class system, much less be in the American hierarchy in the way it's set up, that we are even, there is a hierarchy in America, but Black people are excluded from even being in that hierarchy by race, right? So it only makes sense that the mechanism that they have to maintain the order of the hierarchy, which is law enforcement and cultural law enforcement and hierarchical law enforcement, it only makes sense that the people who are viewed as the bottom would be the ones who are going to get the most policing of it, we got to keep these people in their place no matter what. So I think the concept of accountability has to be every bit as important as the concept of financing. Because look, we rename them the Public Department of Public Safety, and we have mental health, and we do all of these things. And the first Negro they beat to death, nobody gets charged. What have we, okay, they don't have a gun now. They just take their taser out and beat him to death. He's just as dead, and nothing's going to happen. Nowadays they will give the family some money. That's about all they'll do. But the next day somebody else is going to get it. And for every one that we happen to have video, so they're held accountable, there's 25 more that there is no video available and that nobody's held accountable. So what there has to be, things such as, and one of the big things I say, police departments, or whatever we're going to call them, cannot investigate themselves when it comes to any brutality or physical complaint, and really any complaint. A police department shouldn't be investigating themselves. Or what do we have? The Freddie Gray thing. I was all around, but my buddy runs an organization, a community organization in that area. And as soon as it happened and they're doing the investigation, I said, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. They're going to do an internal investigation and they're going to make a finding that nobody was at fault. So isn't it interesting? They throw this brother on the ground. They put a knee in his back. When you see the video, he's like dragging his knee. He's half paralyzed. He's like dragging his legs behind him, half paralyzed when they throw him in a wagon. And then conveniently, the investigation finds, well, it happened when he was in the wagon and the door was closed and he was by himself. How convenient is that? The only finding that they could have made that would exonerate everybody was, well, he happened to be in a room when nobody was around. No, it wasn't when it was a 250-pound guy with his knee on his neck for 5 minutes and he was screaming at the top of his lungs and his bones was cracking. He wasn't injured then. He was injured when he was in the the vehicle with the door closed by itself. And Marilyn Mosby, who was the state's attorney, even basically said afterwards, well, you know, with the police department doing their own, what she said was the internal investigation squad was part of the defense team. She was right, but that's always the case. Always. Look, how you going to invest? Garland Nixon, I was the commander of the investigation division for a police department, including internals. How are you going to have a decent internal? I'm investigating you, and we're on a bowling league on Thursday nights. And like, hey, don't worry about it there, buddy. Nick, I got you covered. Oh, can you pass me another one of those beers? And don't forget, don't hurt your hand. We got to make sure you bowl at 250 this week. We're going against a tough team. It's absurd. So the other part of it is, don't just get caught up in the financing. Understand that even more important to me, what's more important is that you deal with the investigations of brutality. You deal with the accountability part of it so that people don't do stuff and walk. So, you know, you got new groups and they're all changed, but they can still do whatever they want to and get away with it. That's the big thing to me anyway. Maybe it's just because that's what I've worked on. It seems most important to me.
I just want to give a quick shout out real quick. Thanks so much, Anthony, for the super chat. Peace and prosperity and solidarity from Canada. All right. Got someone from Canada watching. Thanks so much. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I just want to add, I want you guys to understand the point that Garland is making is actually extremely, extremely important, right? Like, you don't want to be the people who like lead a revolution and then you need a revolution 5 years later, right? So how do you prevent stuff like this to happen? How do you prevent? Let's say we are successful, and once again, the fight for abolition will be done on the local level. That's the point of 10 demands. You got to understand, you need local allies on a local level. You need local coalitions to get this done, right? So you got to do it smart. You can't just overhaul the police, abolish the police, and then have public safety. Like Garland used that term, and I love it. That's a term I use all the time. Like, yeah, it's public safety. Have a department of public safety. That's not policing. Public safety. Everyone is for that. Once again, this is the language that abolitionists, you gotta know to use. Like, so Garland is extremely on point on that. But I want to show you guys this from 10 Demands, because once again, this is something that we gave a lot of thought to, because I was one of the people that helped write this stuff. I think let's go with number 4, because the point is, defund the police is 1 out of 10 of our demands you see here, right? And that's the good point Garland made, right? You can't just focus on finances. But once again, if you're a smart and educated abolitionist, you know that. So as well, once again, you gotta institute this locally. Institute complete law enforcement transparency and accountability. And then I'll go to 6 just to save time. Install community representation, oversight, and safety measures. Elect independent community councils for needs assessment, municipal decisions making and oversight. So our point is, and you guys can read it for yourself, but our point is invest in community-based public safety measures. So you got to rebuild the system the right way. And there are a lot of people who talk about abolitionists like we don't have a plan. Like, and to be honest, there are some. Like, I do talk to some who they don't know that I wrote 10 Demands, that I did a lot for this movement. So they will say stuff to me all the time because I will talk about defund. Like, once again, that's 1 out of 10 demands. And one thing that I used to sell this is talk about the absurdity of our police budgets. And I see these people, they say this all the time. I'm not for defund the police. I'm for abolishing the police. Defund the police is the road to abolition, right? So I'm trying to think of a proper analogy. So I'm a martial artist, right? That's like saying I don't like boxing. I like kickboxing. When you kickbox, you're using boxing. You know what I mean? So that's the best analogy I can think of right now. But there are a lot of abolitionists I see that they don't have the path. My point I want to bring up is you can't just have a revolution and then set up a system that needs to be revolutionized in like 5 years, right? So you got to do it right. And that's an important point. If you're going to have a Department of Public Safety, now we're talking about what abolition actually looks like. Now we're at the point where we're defunding the police. Once again, not going to happen overnight. You got to oppose the budgets as they come up every year. Like, once again, we're talking about the reality of the situation. People always ask, what will it look like? This is what it look like. Oppose every budget locally until you get as low as you can. And then once you get to the point where you get resources, where you can put together the public safety committees, you got to follow these demands. You got to put the oversight committees in. You got to have local elections. Like, the people that are actually doing the community protections, they got to be elected. And one thing, I'm not the one who came up with these ideas. And I'm sure there's a lot that I'm leaving out here. there are a lot of great abolitionist writers. Angela Davis is one of them, and there are a lot of many that I'll share this quickly because we have a lot of resources. I've still got a lot of education as well, but these are the kind of things that people that wrote about this kind of stuff, right? Let me see if I can find this caveat here. You see how it works. We got all these multiple steps as well. See now. Oh wait, let me see if I can find the right one. So, damn, I'm losing it. But there's a part where there's a lot of writers that talk about like different philosophies of community defense and public safeties. I couldn't find the link. I'm sorry, guys. But check those out. Angela Davis. There are a lot of Black women abolitionists who wrote by what their theory is. And there's something else that, once again, this requires education. People need to understand that Black leftist thought and even abolitionist thought is not monolith. Like, there are a lot of different ideas that people have, like what we do in public safety. Let's get there first. And then we can put together and figure out what the best way to have like real oversight, so we don't have to just redo this shit in like 5 years. So that's a good point that Garland brought up because it's something worth discussing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think the thing to recognize too, it's interesting on the demilitarizing the police. I have a lot of mixed emotions about that. Not that I'm not completely for it, but so I'll throw the two things I think out, and y'all can make some. You're a smart guy. You can make some sense out of it. Number one, people say, well, isn't it terrible all the things the police are doing now? And I say the only difference now is we got cameras. Did everybody got a cell phone? Ain't nothing changed. Talk to older Black folks. I grew up just outside of Baltimore in the suburbs, but I, went to church in Baltimore, relatives in Baltimore, cousins all hung out in Baltimore and all. So, I got to see, what was going on there, and I got to see the abuse, and they weren't militarized, and they didn't have tanks, and they was beating brothers and treating them terrible and doing terrible things. Now they are. And they're still doing terrible things, but we have cameras, so sometimes we catch them on the odd occasion. Every now and then they get caught doing the stuff. Most of the time they get away with it. So one side of me says, yeah, I'm for it, but don't think that how somehow the militarization has changed police culture. They just got a little more stuff to do the same stuff they were doing before. They just got a little nicer, military garb and stuff to do it now, and some tanks so they can be a little bit more intimidating. But they was beating brothers up and shooting them and doing the same stuff they were doing before in a different uniform. But the other part of it is, I was there to see what militarization is about. A lot of people don't know this. Militarization of the police was in no way about militarizing them so they can do more stuff. Here's what it was about. It was about money. It was after 2003. I can tell you what happened. I was a high-ranking police official. I won't go through what I saw. I can tell you examples, but I'll just tell you what basically what happened. In a nutshell, the military industrial complex, they make tanks. They made these things called MRAPs. These are these vehicles that were made for what are those vehicle-borne explosives? The bombs that they were planting under the ground in Iraq and all that kind of stuff, right? To take explosions and these mini tanks, personnel carriers. They're making all this stuff, right? And they're selling it to the military. And then they started thinking, if we had a bigger market, we could sell it even more. So then they go to Congress and they say to Congress, why don't you allocate another $1 billion, $2, $3, $4 billion for these police departments, give it to the police departments, and then tell the police departments they can only use it to buy this gear. So what was militarization about the police about? It was the military industrial complex simply looking for another market. And how did police departments get them? Did police departments suddenly have the money in their budget to buy all this stuff? No, it didn't. Suddenly Congress passes it and somebody from Washington calls the police department. Hello, police department. Yeah, we're going to give you $20 million. Oh, gee, thanks. But we're going to send some people to talk to you from several companies. They're going to give you some options of the things that you can buy. You're going to get uniforms and machine guns. You're going to get tanks. You're going to get So it was actually an extension of the military budget that was pumped into the police departments simply so the military industrial complex could make more money. I remember them calling me from my department. Hey, we've got these, what do they call it? chemical biological and nuclear suits, and we're going to send them to all your officers. And at the time I was in charge, I said, nah, they ain't gonna use them, and they're only good for 2 years. They said, and I looked and I'm like, they're $80,000. No thanks, we don't want them. Right. A couple weeks later, I get a letter. They will be delivered. You know what happened? They were delivered. They put them in a warehouse or something. They sat there for 2 years until the end date was, and they threw them in the trash can. It's money laundering. So yes, effectively, it comes out as they're all militarized, and now, you know, they're much more intimidating looking. But in reality, it wasn't about just giving them money to be more intimidating looking or more intimidating. It was money laundering for the military industrial complex.
We have a question here. What does Garland want to happen with regard to policing? What are his goals? I'm suggesting we're not in alignment.
What would I have happen? Number one, I would have a complete revamping where we don't have police departments anymore. We have public safety departments. I would completely, I would have some sections that are, there would be sections that are armed. We're in a country with a lot of guns. I don't see how you're going to be able to, you know, there's people robbing a bank and they're shooting. It's going to be hard to send somebody. You ain't going to get nobody that's going to respond to that without a gun. So you're going to have probably a small contingent of armed people, but you're going to have a lot of, other people who respond to things in other ways that are not just enforcement. The other thing is this: all the going around writing people tickets all the time, that would change. It's like, you know, they're going around, and as you said, now there are countries like, I think it's Sweden, where if you get a ticket, it's based on how much you make. But, you know, here, they pull a guy over in a Benz and he's worth $10-20 million. They ain't probably just give him a warning anyway. So there'd be a lot less ticketing, as we saw in Ferguson, particularly. A lot of times, what do? The poor Black communities, poor people are victimized. It's like another tax for poor people, ticketing all the time. So there would be a lot less of ticketing of people for minor offenses, a lot less arresting of people, and of those, you know, minor offenses, I think, should be treated in a much more for use of a better term, a violator-friendly way. Yes, somebody has violated the law technically. That don't mean you got to write them a big ticket or they got to go to court or get a criminal offense on their record. So I would be a lot more leaning towards a different kind of society when it came to law. I would totally change the police department to work with other departments also, so that the police department, the Department of Public Safety is all one, which includes paramedics, which includes firemen, which includes various. So this is all one thing, and that Department of Public Safety works as a unit in the best interest of the people, not just going out and, you know, what we see where they patrol the street and grab somebody and slam them on the ground. I mean, in the poor communities, we saw it in New York when they enforced these mask mandates and stuff, right? What did they do? Or you weren't allowed to be out because of lockdown. They went into the poor communities and they grabbed people, throwing them on the ground, beating them the crap out of them. And in the Upper East Side, they're just walking by, waving to the rich white folks. Hey, how you doing? You know, so, you know, in a nutshell, I don't know if that summed it up, but that's my thoughts.
I know I'm a far leftist Marxist, but my overall politics is having a community that take care of each other. So when you actually hear Garland Nixon describe his what he would love to see with the Department of Public Safety, there's literally nothing I disagree with. Now I'm gonna add something else to that though. And once again, now this is more like Marxist, leftist, anti-capitalist thought. When people think about law enforcement, when they think of public safety for the most part, why is the initial thought always punitive? Why is it always, oh, we gotta get the crackhead, oh, we gotta get the criminal? When I think of public safety, what about the senior citizen lady who don't have no food in her refrigerator, but she has a hard time moving around? She's starving. That happens a lot. So why can't the public safety department deliver food? What if there's a blackout in the area in the middle of a winter and there are people that are freezing? Department of Public Safety, they can bring candles to them. This is public safety. Like, are we gonna allow those people to freeze to death? In our current system, they would. The police had nothing to do with that. So what's really public safety? Allowing those people to freeze to death, or have a fascist people that got badges who harass people who smoke a plant? Let's be real. So that's the only thing I would add to what Garland said. Like, not only do we have part of the Department of Public Safety, but our entire society under what? Like, the question was like, under what you envision? What I envision, our society works completely different. Like, that public safety department doing grocery deliveries, like there are food banks that they helping out. Like, we're a long way away from this, right? But we talking about the ideal situation. That what I would love to see. Now, we actually had that. Where crime coming from? That's the theory behind abolition. Is like, if you take care of people with material goods, that's how you decrease the crime rate. Like, if you get to that person before he gets to the point where they get desperate, what happens? And that is what I would love to see my public safety department do. Like, not only like be just punitive. Oh, what this guy doing over there? Oh, what's going on with her? Like, I see her kid looking kind of skinny. Like you know what I mean? Like, let's get them some food. You know what I mean? So this is the next level of thought, right? But we're not there yet. But this kind of education I would love to spread, because if you ask the average person what society they want, I think, like, if I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of these older Black people, which I have, I gave speeches in Black barbershops. I talk to older Black people about abolition and thought all the time. When I talk about this community aspect, like real public safety, they are down. Like, they are down, man. But they're not down for the fear mongering of what abolitionist thought is, and we gotta get past that. It's something that's been hurting us, but we gotta get past it, right? So. 100% on point overall with the public safety. We got to add some Marxist thought, and I'm not saying you don't, but I'm saying that in terms of as a movement, like, add Marxist anti-capitalist thought in that as well. Like, help feed each other, help clothe each other, help take care of each other's needs as part of public safety. That's what I would add as well.
Let me add this too, because you mentioned the crackhead or whatever. As an example, when I was a kid and I saw, particularly in Baltimore City, this big heroin problem, right? They were junkies and they were pushers and they were moral failures according to our society. But now that they're middle class or poor white kids, they're victims, and they're victims of society and victims of, what are we going to do about all these poor people? Now, I agree with them. But that paradigm was not applied to Black folks. When Black folks were victims of heroin abuse, when they were victims of drug abuse and alcoholism, they were moral failures. And now that it's creeped really heavily into the white community, now there is some level of forgiveness and some level of feelings for those people that they're victims. So another thing I think that we have to do as a society, when we say the crackhead or the person who's on drugs or the alcoholic, is recognize, to me, they are victims of our system. Overall, they are victims of a system that drive them down, that give them no options, no opportunity. They're victims of abuse, etc. I was in law enforcement, and I can tell you, you go into a prison, the stories you're going to hear are the same. You're not going to hear people that were born behind a white picket fence with a mother and a father and 2.5 brothers and sisters in a minivan. You're going to hear of people whose parents were alcoholics, whose parents were on drugs, who were on the street, many who were on our foul and horrible system, where they were in, they were thrown from home to home till they were 17, and then they, aged out of the foster program and thrown out onto the streets. So a lot of these people that we disregard and that the police are grabbing or locking up out of desperation, a lot of young girls, prostitution, they're working as strippers, things of that nature, because they were in, you'd be surprised, a lot of them were in foster care. And at 18, they're thrown out of foster care. They never got a decent education. They were abused when they were in foster care. So what I think we have to also look at is, and change the paradigm of looking at people who are looked at as the dregs of society, the alcoholic, the prostitute, the this, the that people oftentimes in these circumstances are victims of our society. And it is incumbent upon our society to spend the money to help them to fix their lives, to help them to give an opportunity, and, to help to train people to be able to apply themselves, to have rooms and beds and places for people. If you're an alcoholic, if you're a crackhead, if you're a heroin addict, our government can't afford rehabilitation for you. And we have to look at opportunities like that. We just, see the thing about it. If you're wealthy and you're an alcoholic, if you're wealthy and you have mental illness, you're eccentric. They laugh at you, okay, they're old so-and-so, he's kind of eccentric. It's mental illness or whatever. But if you have mental illness or alcoholism, oftentimes from abuse and all other things, and from a, difficult childhood, then you are viewed as a moral failure. I think we have to change the way we look at people and get away from this idea that people are moral failures, to recognize they are victims of the society that threw them under the bus, and the society should have a responsibility to try to bring their lives up and give them an opportunity, instead of just throw them in jail and throw them out of there for a couple years, and then they get out and they don't have any more skills or anything else. They're just as broken emotionally, and they go back to reach for whatever it was that was self-medicating, and they're back in jail again in no time. That's our society creating that, not just bad people in our society.
Yeah, there is a lack of empathy for Black pain. And that's all across the country, by the way. So I have one more question. This one's for both of you. This is a little bit different. It says South Africa is a socialist country run by Black folk. I'm interested in Nick and Garland's opinion on why it has failed without their built-in racial excuses. Now that's interesting, because how can you talk about South Africa without talking? Never mind. Let me stop. I'm the moderator here. I'm not supposed to give him my opinion, but I guess we'll go with Nick. Do you want to answer this?
So I don't know that much about South Africa. I'm not gonna pretend I do. I do want to talk about a concept though, because I can't answer this question directly. Like there are people that always say that what about this socialist country that's failed? Like what about this communist country that failed? And I just want to set the record straight. There's no point in which socialism or communism has failed. Socialism and communism was defeated by imperialism. So how can you say, like, Venezuela is like the biggest example, right? The DPRK is another example. How can you say these countries failed when they would have been sanctioned to death by the largest empire in human history? That doesn't make sense. So once again, I can't comment on South Africa, but if anyone want to say, "Oh, how can you endorse socialism because this country?" What is the history behind that? Because I can tell you, every single socialist country, at least in the Western Hemisphere, has CIA involvement. To a point where you have people that democratically elected as socialists because they view that as the best route for their life. But then the United States and the CIA got involved and coup their leader and put a neoliberal in charge that will destroy their country. And then they put socialists in charge. And they're like, oh, look at how the state of the country. This is because of socialists. So my answer to that is I don't know that much about South Africa. I assume it's corruption, like one of the comments said. But when it comes to socialism and communism as a theory itself, you can't say it's been defeated, because if you read recent history, this is not me wishing this was the case. Like if you read the Cold War, if you read what happened, it was defeated by the U.S. imperialism and capitalist powers, right? But I'll let Garland take from here.
A couple of things. First, I'll say, where Elon Musk is from, a wealthy family in South Africa, the richest man in the world. When you look at Africa, you cannot talk about any of it without what's happening with colonialism and imperialism that's still going on to this day. That, a rich country like South Africa, like South Africa is having, still you have these people in there that are making money off the diamonds. Yes, they supposedly are not apartheid anymore, but you have these white families and white corporate entities around the world that are still extracting the wealth out of South Africa that's not going into the hands of the people in South Africa. And oftentimes in Africa, you'll see, such as we have seen often as, in Haiti and other places where, yeah, it's a Black government, but oftentimes the people there are puppets of colonialist powers. So to look at Africa, and find out right now, Ethiopia, look what's going on. I mean, don't get me wrong. The guy who's running it is a bit of a neoliberal, but I mean, he's better than what they had. And now the U.S. is saying, well, he's maybe a little too friendly with China or Russia. We got to overthrow him. So the people in Africa aren't free from the hands of colonialism and imperialism. So I'm not going to look at any African country and say it's failing or it's not failing of its own merit until, the French are no longer in there owning all the ports, and the U.S. and the colonialist of the United States and Europe are not in there robbing those people blind anymore. And that's not going on right now. So I'm not blaming the Black folks of South Africa. They've been getting robbed for the last, ever since, colonialist Europe, went over there and started oppressing them.
Yeah, and I want to remind everybody too, I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but Margaret Thatcher actually wanted to push out Black South Africans from their own country. And that's the person, by the way, that Ilhan Omar said she would like to meet?
That was her role model. That was her
Yeah.
role model. And one thing, because I thought the shade at the end of the comment was kind of funny. Because this is something I've been pushing back on people for a while. Because especially ever since we got a platform, whenever you have black leftists that talk about race, it make a lot of white privileged progressives and leftists uncomfortable. But how can you possibly separate the concept of politics and identity politics? How politics affect your community? These same people who will get upset at us for bringing up the facts, like for example, how civil asset forfeiture impacts black people at around a 65% rate. So acknowledging that is playing the race card. The concept is ridiculous because the same people who are quick to say that black leftists and other leftist thinkers play the race card, their entire politics is dominated by white identity politics. Think about this, guys. And once again, I am not afraid to touch controversial topics. I made the leftist argument for open borders on my channel. And now I broke down the people who are nationally opposed to this, a lot of people who are nationally opposed to this, and they are very, very open about this. Like if you ask Republicans and right wingers, now there also is a leftist argument against open borders. I acknowledge that, and I want to have that discussion. Like that's what I do, right? But the right wing argument against open borders is mostly based on they don't want a white genocide to happen. That's the concept of a white displacement theory. That is what Tucker Carlson, this is what they talk about all the time. So why do black leftists, why are we the only ones who are attacked for talking about the realities of what happened in our community? But people like Tucker Carlson and Republicans and conservatives, they can talk about the white genocide and talk about that all the time. But you guys don't bring that up. I just want consistency, right? But Garland, what's your take?
Well, here's the other thing. When you talk about borders, as a person who I'm a big anti-imperialist. You cannot talk about anything going on the southern border without talking about the United States and what it has done in Central and South America. You'll notice ain't nobody coming from Nicaragua. Why is that? Nicaragua has that socialist government. Let me tell you, I have some friends there that was not there not long ago. When you go into a hospital, there's a sign, and it's a poor country. But what money they have, they spend on the people. It's one of the safest countries in the world. And you go in a hospital, there's a sign in the hospital that says, if anybody tries to charge you, report them to the government, right? Those people are not crossing the borders. But look what we've done to the people of Guatemala. Look what we've done to the people of El Salvador. So when what they're saying is, we want to go to their countries and destroy and destabilize their whole region. And when they show up, when what we have done shows up at our doorstep, we want to say, we don't want them here. We don't want them here. They don't want to be here. They want their country. We destabilize and destroy their country. And then, oh no, like it's an act of God, like it's magic, like somebody transported them here like Star Trek, that there's no reason. And Kamala Harris has the nerve to go to a country, look up the, what was that called? There was a massacre. I can't remember. Oh, look, I don't have to go in South America. Every country had a massacre that was by the U.S. But a country where the U.S. massacred, put together hit squads and massacred 100,000 people and then say, just don't come. That sounds like Nancy Reagan, just say no crap, ignoring all of the social problems that you commit. Even you go to Europe, what do? They destabilize the whole Middle East, and the Europeans scream, oh no, all these Africans and Middle Easterners are coming here. You destroyed, destabilized, and bombed their countries, impoverished their countries. Of course, that's what they're going to do. They're trying to get some food. So, but the whole border issue is about imperialism and a refusal. It's about these imperial countries that want to go destroy, destabilize, rob the other countries full of brown folks blind. But when their evil deeds follow them home, they want to try to, all of a sudden, this is our country. We have a right to protect it. Well, don't they have a right to protect their country from you?
That's such a good point. I gotta have you on International Leftist Coalition because that's the point. That's one of the points I made. But I'll pass it right to you, Sabby. But I know that controversial, and there are a lot of leftists that are not on the same boat as me because I'm like, how can you call yourself anti-imperialist, but you want to have strict border implementation that pretty much only applies to workers in the working class. So I go at it from a class-based approach. Borders are only decided based on cost. So if Elon Musk wants to move to Europe, he will just pay X amount of money it takes for him to move to Europe, right? So the only thing that Borders does, it's a fine. If you want to go here, it's a fine. So it's only a barrier for workers. So, and then companies and corporations, they can shift their companies overseas, but the worker can't follow them. So if you're a leftist and you want to strongly argue against borders, once again, I know there actually is a leftist argument for border protections. This is what Bernie uses all the time, right? But I went through that and I gave my opinion against that. But you got to be serious. Like, if you look at the right wingers, when they talk about it, it's literally all about protecting the white community, protecting their race. They don't want their country to be overran. That's their argument. The leftist argument is worker protection. But my argument is the borders are actually a barrier towards worker liberation. But anyway, that's the conversation. I don't want to hijack the conversation. I literally did a whole episode and stream, and maybe we talk about this Garland one day.
Yeah, I could go on and on about that.
Well, you know what I say? We got to talk about that later. That will derail the whole
reparations. Pay them reparations for what you did to their country. You know what I mean? Yeah, let them stay there. Give them reparations for what you did. You don't want to respect, and one of our commenters said it. You do not respect their borders. You can go to their country. You can literally overthrow the government of their country and put in far right-wing violent puppets who will slaughter their people. So then you're going to say, I can go to your country, steal everything you got, change the government, do everything, but you can't come to my border and cross my border. No, I'm sorry. I don't agree with that. There's a whole lot of things behind that whole border stuff that's a lot deeper than just that's the end result of it. The end result is there's a bunch of poor people standing at your borders that want to cross it. But how did they get there? You destroyed their lives there. Look what NAFTA did. Why did all of those poor Mexican farmers come across? Because NAFTA, 1 million farmers lost their farms because of the price of corn and all went down because of big agro. And what did they do? They came up to the border. Oh no, don't let them in. But we let all the money in.
No, it's true. It's like,
then we send a billionaire, closes the factories here and sends all the jobs over to China so he can make more profit. He puts all the people here out of business. And then he says, oh yeah, it's the people at the border. They're the ones that are stealing your jobs. No, you still send his job overseas so you can make a fortune. And now you're going to blame this guy that can't even read and write in his own language, much less yours. It's just, it's a big blame game so that the people who are really doing it, the elite ruling class, do not have to take responsibility. They can blame the lowest person on the totem pole they can possibly find. And that's the poor guy whose country they destabilized and who they robbed blind at the border and probably killed his family.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I want to comment really quick about how like pushing people out, especially people like in the Middle East area. When I lived in Germany, when I was a kid, there was a group of kids, they were from Turkey. And for those who don't know, at that point in time, I'm not sure if it's still the same, but there were Turkish refugees in Germany. They were pushed out, right? And so Germany took them in. They lived in, they called them ghettos. And it doesn't look like a ghetto like what we have in the United States, like what people call ghettos here. But over there, they were called ghettos. They had their own like area that they stayed in. When I would come home from school, there were a group of kids from Turkey. They used to go through our trash can, like our dumpster where we used to throw out the trash. We lived in a military base. They used to go through the dumpster to get food. So I'm seeing kids like my age having to go through the dumpster for food. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, this is what happens when those people are pushed out of their countries. When other countries get involved, they intervene, and those people who are from there are pushed out and they have to go somewhere else. And they still had to go through the trash to find food. So that's something like I'll never forget. And I remember asking my dad, like, I don't understand. Like, why do they have to go through for food? And my dad explained to me, let me explain to you why they're here first. So I heard about this a long time ago. And this causes problems all across the world, not just in Haiti, not just, in the United States, not just in Mexico. It causes problems all across the world. It's a big problem. Oh, go ahead, Nick. I thought you were gonna.
Well, yeah. The last thing I'll say on the whole border immigration topic is that common, and I mean, I think this is mostly like widely accepted, like on both sides. Oh, we can't have these immigrants come over because it'll drive down the value of work, wages go down. And I'm gonna be straight up honest, guys. I reject the premise. Like our billionaires making record profit. If they wanted to pay the workers, they would just pay the workers. Stop using these immigrants as a scapegoat for why your manager's not paying you more. There's nothing that they are doing that is stopping the Walton family from paying their workers a living wage. There's nothing that they're doing that's stopping Jeff Bezos from paying Amazon workers. There was a study that shows that if Jeff Bezos can pay all his workers $100,000 per year, and it wouldn't touch his fortune. I think they said he would still make like $100 billion or whatever. Like, I don't remember the studies exact on top of my head. My question for people who say immigrants drive down the value of labor: how? I want to hear the explanation on how these people that are crossing the border because of U.S. imperialism is stopping Elon Musk, is stopping Jeff Bezos from paying his workers. So I'm sorry, my answer to that is I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. Explain to me the concept. No one has. They just repeat it as fact. Oh, immigrants drive down the wages. People just repeat it without explaining the concept. But anyway, Garland, do you want to add to that?
I'll just say this. If that were the case, they'd be begging for him, because the idea of neoliberal capitalism is to, what do? You make a value of $100 an hour for your work, and they want to pay you $1 an hour and keep the 99. So if they drove down the wages, that'd be good. They keep forgetting that they're the ones that turned this into a financialized. We had an industrial capitalist system that made things. This is a financialized capital system where all they do is play tricks with money on computers in Wall Street to make gigantic fortunes. People don't make stuff anymore. So how is some guy on the border going to be affecting my salary or my money when they're making money off derivatives and asset-backed securities and things of that nature? It's absurd. But again, in our society, in the neoliberal society, you must always blame the people at the bottom. When there was a welfare, what did white Americans say? Well, it's the welfare people. Why? Because they were the poorest people they could find. In the world of COVID, whose fault is it? It's the unvaccinated people. It's always the lowest people on the totem pole that you can find. Whose fault is it? Is the CEO of the corporation? Nah, it's the guy there that's the mopping the floor, the janitor. He's the one. That's the neoliberal way. Blame the guy at the bottom. I never buy that.
I always see a few people say, what about supply and demand of workers? I always see some people saying that. Stop using those capitalist language. Like, this whole concept not existing when we talk about seizing the means of production. My point is that the capitalist class has the wealth to pay the workers. So when you say, they're drawing down the wage of workers, that does not compute to me. That capitalist language, I reject. That's true under a capitalist system, but under what we want, like, that's irrelevant, because we had the means of production, workers be paid properly, right? Anyway, I'll leave with that.
I'll make the last thing. Anybody go out and search right now. The corporations now are making a higher profit. It's been all in the news the last couple of weeks than ever in history. So the corporations are making the highest profits they're ever made. There is no excuse for them not doing anything they want to do, but they ain't going to do it, because they're going to keep everything to themselves.
This has been an amazing discussion. I've learned so much from both of you, like, sitting here. I hope everyone has enjoyed this. I want to close with this. Now, this is a report. Some of you may have seen me share this on here before. If you're new, you probably have not seen this yet. A lot of people did not know about it. Now, this was told to me by Renee Johnson. Renee Johnson actually wrote a Substack article about this report. That's how I found out about it. I didn't see it in mainstream media, and everyone needs to know about this. There was a committee of people across the globe that came together, and they believe, and they wrote a report about this. Is 188 pages, which I'm not going to read on here. You're welcome to do so yourself. But they believe that the United States government is guilty. Oh, lost my point here. Is guilty of human rights violations towards African Americans because of the police state. Now, this is a long report. I only got through like half of it, to be honest with you. But they pointed out several examples and cases that have happened in the United States with Black people and the police. It's summed up here in this article. Oh, hold on. I think just one second. Oh, it won't let me share the article.
I can add this, Sabby, while you wait for it, while you grab this, because I actually covered this on my show. You're 100% right. There's like, this is one of the reports that no one covered. I covered this on my show when it came out. Do you guys know when they did this commission, they had doctors and PhDs from multiple fields on every single continent? Like, they had people from South Africa. South Africa. They had people from Africa, South America. They had American people. They had people from Eastern Europe, Western Europe. Like, they purposely did that so they can have a lot of different backgrounds and political beliefs behind this. And this is one of the largest comprehensive reports that has ever been written about police violence in America. And they found that it constitutes a crime, like Sabby said, a crime against humanity our state has done. How many people reported on this? I didn't want to think. Like, I remember when this first came out, I was immediately on it. I dove through it. I read through it. It's like, dude, you can't even do it justice in a segment because it's so well documented. Like, they look at many different cases. They look at history. They compared it to other countries and how they, like, even the countries who are imperfect, they compare it to. Like, it's an amazing report. And it's one of those things, like, soon as this report drops, it should end the entire debate right there. But it wasn't discussed. It's one of the things that gets lost in the chatter. But that's why I want to add to this part, because it's amazing report.
And I would add it, but I can't. My Google Chrome froze. So, like, I'm still live on YouTube, but my Google Chrome froze. But I can add it after the stream in the comment section, the link to the article and the link to that report, because it's really important that you guys look over that, because they point out specific examples of what has happened with the police and African Americans in the United States and how they are proven it's a crime against humanity. And they contacted Joe Biden. Now, this happened after he was elected. They've contacted Joe Biden and told him that he needs to intervene. Joe Biden never responded to them.
Oh, he wants to give the police $300 million more. That's how he's going to intervene. That's his plan to fix it all. And I don't imagine Kamala Harris is much better.
Guys,
I mean, to me, the idea that Joe Biden or Kamala Harris is going to do anything the Democratic Party, period, is going to do anything on the behalf of Black folks. Well, maybe there'll be a first time. Where they are now, I have no confidence that you're getting anything out of those clowns.
No, I don't. Guys, thanks so much for coming on. Like, this was a really good discussion, you guys.
Yeah, I was looking forward to it.
Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. Eric, I'm going to need your help here since my Google Chrome is frozen. If you go onto the right-hand side and click on brand and then scroll down, you should see a video that says outro. If you can go ahead and click on that, and then you'll have to hit in broadcast after it plays. All right. Have a good night, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot.
I'm stuck here. Oh, there it is.